Well, welcome everybody and Happy New Year. We're so glad that you can join us tonight. We have a great many exciting things to talk about this evening, and I'm excited about the chance for you to be able to hear from several CF Foundation leaders about our progress in CF, cure, care, and community. But before we start, let's do a couple of quick housekeeping items. So first of all, make sure you've changed your chat settings to all panelists and attendees. That way everyone can see your chat. In addition, I was going to ask for everybody to let us know where you're from tonight, although I see that's already been happening in the chat. As usual, the CF community is way ahead. But if you haven't, let us know where you're from. We know there's people all over the country, and welcome. The other thing, before we start talking about progress tonight, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you who volunteered, who have donated, to our board members, to all people with CF who contribute every day to our mission. You're truly the reason that we're able to do what we do every day. I especially want to say thank you to the 2022 National Corporate Champions and top national teams. You've showed your commitment to the foundation in extraordinary ways in 2022, really exceeding all of our expectations. You know, the top national teams who walked and hiked and cycled and hosted virtual events and virtual fundraisers all over the country with peer-to-peer campaigns each raised over $50,000 in 2021 and collectively raised over $2 million. So thank you. And I also have to say thank you to our national corporate champions, who include 34 of our top corporate sponsors, who total combined support topped $6 million, with American Airlines, AbbVie, and Choate Construction leading the way. So we're so grateful for your longstanding support. Thank you. Now let's start to talk about the achievements you've made possible over this past year. I'm going to give a high-level overview to kick us off and sort of recap some of 2021, but then we're going to be able to hear some details from amazing team leaders who are going to really be able to dive in, and I know you'll love hearing from them. As you know, we always talk about our work using three famous C's: cure, care, and community. And we're going to start tonight with that first C, cure. So 2 years ago, as everyone knows, we announced our Path to a Cure initiative. This is a commitment to develop treatments and therapies for all people with CF, no matter what mutations they have, and eventually a cure for CF. And you know what? Despite COVID, despite the challenges we faced, we've continued to forcefully advance the path to a cure. We're now actually funding 35 major research programs in industry related to the path to the cure, which cover a wide range of genetic technologies, including RNA therapies and gene therapy and gene editing, far more programs than any other time in our history. In addition, we've taken some really innovative approaches to make sure that we attract the best science in the world to focus on cystic fibrosis. And we've done this by, yes, funding early company research on CF genetic technologies, but also by collaborating with remarkable groups like Longwood and Flagship's Pioneering Medicine. With Pioneering Medicine, which we announced this year, it's a first of its kind collaboration with a remarkable group that combines technologies from several companies to develop a separate company that focuses on cystic fibrosis. And this will really help develop and drive the development of new therapies, particularly genetic therapies for CF. So more about that later on tonight, but just to highlight how innovative this approach is, I had the pleasure of speaking earlier this week at the Harvard Business School to talk to other healthcare nonprofits so they could learn about this approach. I have to talk about the Foundation's research lab in Boston as well. It continues to have a central role in advancing the path to the cure. And you know what? The lab team has continued its critical work throughout COVID. And guess what? Not only just continued its work, Dr. Martin Mentz and that team are actually growing. As a matter of fact, I'm excited to share that we're going to be significantly expanding our lab facility in 2022. This expansion will provide us with the opportunity to not only grow our own research programs, but also start to host scientists from other companies that are focused on CF, so they can learn from our lab team and accelerate their CF programs, including those working on new technologies like gene therapy and gene editing. And as always, as we seek the new opportunities to advance the transformative therapies of tomorrow, we're also working to address the complications of living with CF today, particularly battling infection and supporting those with advanced lung disease. So you may have noticed this first week, we really started the year off right, where we announced 3 new significant grants to companies focused on novel treatments for CF infections. These included approaches like phage therapy and some new antibiotics. And I'm also proud to announce that in 2021, we achieved our infection research initiative goal that we announced a few years ago of awarding over $100 million in grants focused on infection. And we actually did that a year ahead of schedule. So you may be wondering, does that mean we slow down or stop? Absolutely not. We set at least 100 million, and we're excited to be able to continue to push ahead on that. Now, these advancements are due to a remarkable team of visionary scientists that are dedicated to discovery and innovation. And I want to say thank you to all of them, but especially to one in particular tonight. So as you recall, after a long and impressive career, our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Bill Skatch, announced his plans to start to move into retirement this year. So as of January 1st, Bill reduced his role down to 50% time. And thankfully, he'll continue to act as a strategic advisor to us on key science projects. I have to say, what's been accomplished under Bill's leadership has been fantastic. I mean, we've accomplished so much. We expanded our research affairs team. We strengthened our scientific programs. We launched the path to a cure. We significantly expanded our CF scientific network, including quadrupling the number of companies that are engaged in CF research. And did you know that we've funded more than 4,000 academic grants while Bill's been at the lead? So on behalf of the entire CF community, I just want to say thank you, Bill. Let's make sure that we give Bill a big round of applause and lots of love in the chat. He deserves it. So the next question then is, what follows? Who follows Bill, right? Well, the good news for starters is that we already have a fantastic team of scientists that are in place and working harder than ever, and they're not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, we've been continuing to grow that team. But in addition, tonight, I'm thrilled to share with you that a scientist that many of you already know, Dr. Stephen Rowe, will be joining the foundation as our next Chief Scientific Officer, leading our efforts on the challenging work that we still have ahead of us. Steve comes to the foundation after more than 2 decades of providing patient care for people with CF, but conducting research to develop treatments that target the underlying cause of the disease. As you know, he's currently the director at the University of Alabama at Birmingham's Cystic Fibrosis Research Center. He's a professor of 5 different departments there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're obviously that's pretty unusual. He's also been a real pioneer in personalized medicine and translational research for CF, with expertise in rare disease biology, design of clinical trials, and all the things that we're going to need to move ahead. So really distinctly suited to lead the foundation's scientific strategy to partner with the amazing team we already have to accelerate the path to a cure. So adding Dr. Rowe, along with Dr. Skatch as 50% advisory, along with our team, we're in a stronger situation on the science side than any time in our history. And we look forward to working with Dr. Rowe and his team to continue the foundation's legacy of science innovation and develop those treatments for every person with CF and ultimately a cure for this disease. So let's move to that second C, care, right? And in 2021, we saw the advancement of a new era of CF care. And this is because we saw the dramatic beneficial effects of Trikafta, but also the importance of virtual visits as a tool for providing care. So part of this story certainly has been the increasing availability of Trikafta worldwide, and in its expansion to children aged 6 to 11 in the US earlier this year, giving us greater understanding of the dramatic impact that a highly effective CFTR modulator can have on the lives of people with CF. And we've also seen that coming to life in amazing data in our patient registry, including the median predicted survival for people with CF reaching 50 years of age for the first time in our history. CF care teams have been working closely with people with CF to ensure they can continue to receive quality, specialized care throughout the pandemic, whether it's through telehealth or through in-person visits. You know, and our policy and advocacy team has been hard at work as well. They've spent countless hours working to support this effort to ensure that people with CF are eligible to utilize telehealth and that their insurance will cover it. They've also mobilized the community to advocate on other important issues related to COVID-19 to make sure that people with CF have the protections they need. So including advocating for the expansion of the vaccine to children, booster shots for those who are post-transplant, and funding for some critical state programs that provide support for people with CF. And we're going to hear a lot more about the care area from Dr. Bruce Marshall and Dr. Whitney Brown in just a few minutes. But let's move to that last critical C, and that's community. Working together to serve people with CF and their families wherever they are on their journey through programs and services that they help shape. We've expanded our reach to more people with CF and their families than ever before. Actually held 600 virtual and chapter events in 2021. Adults with CF once again led the charge with our second annual Rose Up, our sixth annual BreatheCon, and also provided support for mentoring, mental health, and exercise programs, among many. This past year, we also really started focusing more than ever on creating a community of inclusion and belonging, including the Foundation's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. And we dedicated considerable time to listening to people of color about their experience with CF. This work is essential to achieving our mission of helping all people with CF live the healthiest lives possible. And we're committed to doing more to ensure we serve all people with CF, improving care, outcomes, representation, and belonging, and particularly in communities that have felt unconnected or underserved. And of course, I have to mention the fundraising that's made all of this possible. Thanks to generous donors, we've raised $85 million in 2021. We successfully kicked off the Milestones 3 campaign, of course, led by our long-standing supporter and CF father, Joe O'Donnell. Now, I could go on for a long time about all the things we've accomplished together in 2021, but I thought it'd be much more fun to hear from the rest of the team, and most of all, from people with CF who had a chance, from CF community members who really reflected on what they thought was great from 2021, as well as what they look forward to in 2022. So let's hear from them and then come back and hear from the whole team.
The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation has recognized that we are different members from the same community.
Having a community of people that understand what it's like and can bring that with them is something that is so special and is an integral part of living with CF.
A lot of times throughout the years, we would do the Great Strides walk, and we love all the people out there. We've done it every year, actually, since being in Georgia.
I was diagnosed at age 28, but I spent a long time wondering why I had these certain symptoms and why I wasn't being diagnosed. Meeting other people with CF, you realize, oh, wow, it's just really nice to have somebody who has the same type of story.
Last year, we moved our older daughter from Kaleido to Trikafta. I thought that with Kaleido, we were good enough. I mean, how better we could be. She was great, everything was great. But the doctor said, let's do this. And she started Trikafta. And since then, things has been even better. We never thought that that was possible, but it is. And now she likes to do sport, and she has never ever got sick, and she's gaining weight. So life shines for us now. So we're super happy.
When I come to events, whether it's our endurance events or our, Great Strides walks or annual events, galas, etc., I try to bring a piece of my experience of what it was like as a kid growing up and knowing what I needed to hear. I also, from speaking to my family, know what parents need to hear, especially of newly diagnosed patients. But I also know what I need to hear right now. And I can tell myself that, but sometimes you need to hear it from someone else.
Everyone as a whole needs to be educated that this does happen to many different races. We don't pick this disease. I didn't reach in a hat and grab it. It's genetic.
The BreatheCon conference this past year was actually the first time I've ever participated in any type of CF-related event. And I actually was able to participate in a panel where we discussed having rare mutations. So it's like, wow, there's other people out there who have to deal with this and understand this. It is really nice to have that support and just knowing somebody else has gone through something like you have.
For me in 2022, I look forward to peace. It's been a really hectic year.
To make sure that people know they can speak up, and if they need something, they can get it. That's the important thing for me. It's just, continuing that goal and pushing that mission and making sure that everyone knows that, yes, while we're looking forward to a cure, we also care about your life right now and your needs right now, and most importantly, how you feel right now.
Now with new lungs, I can clean snow off my car, which is usually a burden to everybody. But the fact that I can do it without leaning over and wheezing and coughing after just a few short minutes, that's amazing to me.
In January, the new year, we're going to be transitioning from that PICC line to oral medications. So I'm looking forward to that.
I want to say thank you to every scientist that is in the lab working hard to make my life, my kids' life, a better life.
Fantastic. I would say thank you to Francisca Salas, Cody Allman, Rena Barrow, Nima Shundell for sharing your reflections with us. And guess what? I agree with you. We have so much to be thankful for in 2021. Now we're going to move to what I know many of you have been looking forward to, and that's a conversation with the truly world-class leaders here at the foundation. Before I introduce them, though, I want to remind you, we do want your questions, all right? So type your questions in the Q&A box. We're going to try to get to those as many as we can. But I want to actually invite on our panelists tonight. And the exciting thing is they have over 100 years of experience. So guys, if you want to go ahead and start popping on, that's great. I'll start introducing you. As they're popping on, I want to take a minute so you really actually get to know who you're talking with tonight, including some new faces that we're excited about. And I'm going to start by introducing the newest member of our team. Whitney, you want to wave hello? And that's Dr. Whitney Brown, who's been the director of the Inova CF Center in Virginia for many years, as well as a leading lung transplant physician. And she joined our care focus team this year. Next is Sue Sullivan, a nurse coordinator of the adult CF programs for a decade at Johns Hopkins, at the Oregon Health Sciences Center, before joining us to lead our community partnerships department. Next, Dr. Tony Durmowicz, who has a long history of being both a caregiver and an academic researcher, and then also spent a decade at the FDA reviewing cystic fibrosis drugs. In fact, he was the one at the FDA responsible for approving most of the modulator drugs. So Tony now oversees many of our relationships with drug companies that are developing new CF therapies. And then Dr. JP Clancy, another former CF Center director and researchers that many of you know from his days both at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, as well as the University of Cincinnati, before joining us to oversee the conduct of CF clinical trials and clinical research, including our 92 academic center therapeutic development network. And then finally, the person who's led the clinical care and registry work at the CF Foundation for the last 2 decades, and that's Dr. Bruce Marshall. Bruce was also once a CF Center director in Utah, but the foundation has been blessed to have him as our clinical leader for the last 20 years. So, well, welcome everybody, thanks. And actually, Tony, I'm gonna start. The first question tonight is for you. And we started to talk about this at the top of the night. We started talking about the path to a cure. And certainly, I know a lot of our community members are especially interested in those rare and nonsense mutations, maybe those ones who aren't benefiting from Trikafta. And so I'd love to hear more about where we are with the path to the cure work, particularly genetic-based therapies. So can you fill us in some more details about what's happened in 2021, where we're going in 2022?
Sure, Mike. I guess while we all kind of know that CFTR modulators have been a kind of a revolutionary treatment for a lot of people with CF, that our PTAC program, our Path to a Cure program, the goal is to actually develop therapies for everybody with CF, no matter what the mutation is, and actually, kind of find a cure for CF in the future. So, to address this issue, we're kind of like taking a 2-pronged approach. We have more of a near-term approach, then we have a longer-term approach, because this is a long slog. And the near-term approach is, we're currently helping develop inhaled CFTR messenger RNA therapies. And think of messenger RNA, if you don't already know it, it's like the recipe to tell a cell how to make a protein. In this case, how to make the ion channel for CF. So we're working hard in that area. Now, on the long-term aspect, for a cure for CF, we're going to have to figure out how to insert a gene or do successful gene editing to make the cells produce normal CFTR. And we're working really hard on that area as well. You know, we've made a lot of progress in 2021. There's a company called Translate Bio. I don't know if you know them, but they actually finished the first inhaled CFTR messenger RNA therapy trial in 2021, probably mid to late 2021. And they actually had an abstract at the NACFC meeting a few months ago. So there's some progress there. There's going to be some more of those kinds of therapies coming down the pipe. For the longer term, we're actively investigating lots of opportunities. And, you know, just in the past few weeks, we've invested in are supporting a new company called Saliogen. Don't ask me where the name comes from, but Saliogen, that is a small biotech company that has an innovative new technology in regard to gene insertion and gene editing. And, you know, the innovative technology is that it allows them maybe to introduce a gene into the genome regardless of its length, which is a big deal because CFTR genes are very big. And it's been a limitation of those technologies. So that's one of the main things that we've done just recently. Now, just to pivot a little bit, you heard Mike mention the Longwood Fund and the Pioneering Medicine flagship thing, which has gotten a lot of press in the CF world lately. You know, we're going to continue to talk to venture capitalists and groups like that to try to develop new technologies and understand new therapies for CF that might be developed. And, you know, these groups are kind of like full of very smart people that scan the whole scientific world to look for things to invest in. So us partnering with them is going to allow us to understand what technologies might be applicable to CF and help get contact with those groups to help them convince them and invest in them to help develop therapies with CF. You know, so that's a lot of the big things that are going on. One of the other things that I'll mention is that you don't see this too much because it flies below the radar screen, but there's a lot of infrastructure work, developing assays, developing guidelines to help support the PTAC that is just done by really a great job by people at the foundation behind the scenes. You know, this is a big question, you know, Mike, and maybe I want to ask and see if JP wants to comment on the kinds of clinical trials that the PTAC kind of program will have going on.
Well, thank you, Tony. Great to see everybody. What a great evening. This has been a lot of fun. And I hope you get the message from Tony that we're kind of entering a new era. There's a pivot going on. It doesn't mean we're stopping modulators. We're not going to stop developing symptomatic therapies where they're needed, but there is a real pivot to really focus on those who are not candidates for modulators. And it's not a huge number, but it's a significant number. And we are really focused on getting CFTR-based therapies to this group. And also over time, then it becomes more available to the entire CF community. So to get ready for that, I guess the important point to me is, you know, it's taken a lot of education. We've started to organize ourselves first by learning from the CF community about what they do and don't know about genetic therapies. Sue may mention a little bit more about that later. But then also start to get our research teams, starting to get our healthcare teams and the CF community ready to have the important conversations that are going to lead us into these genetic therapy research approaches. And it's actually really starting to pay off, believe it or not. I mean, we kind of assembled the group over the last 6 to maybe 8 months. And we've already have a company that has submitted a protocol to the to the TDN, which has been reviewed and sanctioned. The company's 4D Molecular. They're doing a genetic-based therapy approach using a modified vector called AAV. And the bottom line is it's been sanctioned and sites are in startup. And so I'm not just saying it's down the road. I mean, it's actually at our doorstep. And so, without getting into details, we have a lot of enthusiasm for some other companies that will be doing some of those approaches that Tony mentioned. There are definitely groups that are looking at mRNA inhaled as a way, not a long-term treatment. It's something you'd have to redose, but really exciting with the concept of giving people working CFTR for those who don't have it. I also want to mention a couple things in the clinical trial world that might be of interest to the broader group. There has been some exciting work by a company named Elox. They've developed a drug that is for people who have nonsense-mediated CF specifically. And that drug has been able to reduce sweat chloride levels a little bit. It's not a lot. It's probably not enough on its own to quite turn into a whole lot of clinical benefit. But it's really shown us that that needle can be moved, and that's actually really exciting. And we're exploring ways that we might be able to improve that effect by adding modulators on top of a drug like Elox. So more to come, but we're really excited about that, those new recent developments. And last thing I just want to mention, there are still ongoing really important observational studies that are helping us understand modulators and how we can start adjusting treatments to really match what people need. I'm just going to mention a couple you may have heard of along the way. One's called Simplify. It's a little more controlled in its approach to look at taking away either hypertonic saline or pulmozyme. Or another one, which is kind of the flip side, same coin, but kind of turned upside down, is really gauging what people are doing, the decisions they're making, and really understanding what's the relationship between changes in their care and how they're feeling while on a drug like Trikafta. So exciting days, Mike. I could go on a lot longer. I'll stop.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think the neat thing, one of the key take homes for me is a lot of times we think, oh, gene therapy or inhaled, this is something way in the future. No, actually, those trials are ongoing. There's more of them this year, right? Which actually, Sue, JP mentioned how we're going to have to think a little bit differently about trials. They're going to look different. I know you've been spending a lot of time doing education, but also listening about how we're going to be successful with those trials. You want to tell us about that from a community partnership standpoint?
I would love to. And I'm going to focus on a word here, and it's partner. And beyond sort of personal fulfillment that you get when you partner, there's a lot of value when we partner with our community when it comes to all of these clinical advancements. We can help direct research towards questions that really matter most to people living with CF. People with CF and their families provide feedback on critical questions at key decision points that can enhance study designs or improve study feasibility. We help promote equity by hearing from people with diverse sets of experiences, and then start to see a more engaged population and informed population. And we develop trust, which is a key component, especially when partnering with historically underrepresented or marginalized groups. Both Tony and JP mentioned genetic-based therapies. In 2021, we conducted a large survey to the CF community, which really sought to start to understand what the general awareness was from the community with these therapies and implications for future clinical trials. Large surveys are an important step in our scientific process. And in this area of research, meaningfully engaging with both people of color or those who are unable to benefit from a CFTR modulator throughout the scientific process is really essential. So through direct community outreach focused around relationship building and trust, and in partnership with our care center network, we actually achieved adequate representation in key racial demographic areas in that survey, and that helped enable us to draw better statistical conclusions. So thank you to each community member who completed that survey, or any, and especially if it was your first time engaging with us. Since then, community members have now joined alongside CF Foundation staff, clinicians and researchers, dedicated now to education efforts and advising on trial design and feasibility for gene-based therapies. In 2021, there were over 160 community members serving on 36 national work groups or committees, more than ever before. And through community voice recruitment, more than double the number of people of color in our community also served on committees last year. Just sit and imagine the rich insights, professional expertise, and lived experience coming to the table. Every voice in this community matters, and we need to hear your unique perspectives. And a great way to do that is to join Community Voice. This is just a glimpse of what we can accomplish when we partner together towards our goal.
Well, thank you, Sue. And I think we may be talking about this later on, but I think one of the things that has jumped out to me is that in that last group that's right now not benefiting from Trikafta, they're going to be doing a lot of these genetic technologies trials, that people of color are particularly prevalent in that group, right? And so we're really going to need to be sort of all hands on deck together to be able to get these studies done, to be able to develop those transformative therapies. So this work is really particularly important. Thank you. So we've been talking about genetic technologies and the future there, but Bruce, modulators are transforming care today, right? And so I know you've been doing a lot of work on the modulator front, understanding about this data. You want to talk some about modulators and care and where we are now with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I mean, there's so much to talk about with the modulators. I could go on for the rest of the hour, so please cut me off if I ramble on too long. But what I'll be sharing is primarily real-world clinical data, and I've got to thank all of you who've consented to share your data with the foundation. It's so important. It contributes to so much of what we do. Now, at last year's national meeting, I shared some preliminary findings, and we've confirmed those findings. And I'll just summarize by saying the data is just simply amazing. Mike mentioned the median predicted age of survival for the first time reached 50 years. When I started in CFTR and research 30 years ago, predicted survival was less than 30 years of age. Just think about that for a minute. As a community, we've added over 20 years of life expectancy. It's mind-boggling. And when you look at another important event in the lives of people with CF, pulmonary exacerbations, we see a substantial decrease in the number. Among adults, 17% in 2020, down from 40% in 2019. Among children, 10%, down from 21%. What does this mean? It means many, many fewer days in the hospital or at home on IV antibiotics. Really important impact of the modulators. Now, these findings have led to an important question. Can we safely reduce the treatment burden, which is up to and beyond 2 hours of treatments a day for some people with CF? Well, I'm really pleased to report, and JP mentioned this, there are 3 ongoing studies about whether one or more chronic therapies can be safely stopped after starting on Trikafta. The studies, and JP mentioned 2, Simplify, Hero 2, there's one in the UK called CF Storm. They're using very different approaches, but they're getting at the same issue. Can we reduce the day-to-day grind of living with CF? These are going to be really important studies. So now I'm going to go on to Trikafta in kids. And what's really exciting is to think about the potential impact of Trikafta on children. Mike mentioned the approval of the drug for 6 to 11-year-olds. And as of the end of the year, there are 63% of the 3,900 children in this age range were prescribed the drug by the end of 2021. The clinical trial results were impressive, and I won't go into detail there, but we're really eager to analyze the 2021 registry data to assess the impact in that important clinical setting. Now, there's a clinical trial in children 2 to 5 years of age as well, and it's fully enrolled, scheduled to close out in the next 6 months or so, and we eagerly await the results in hopes that it will lead to an FDA approval of the drug by the end of this year or early next year. We're really excited about that. So our goal is safe use of highly effective modulators in younger and younger age groups. Why? Because we believe this may prevent onset of the many manifestations of the disease. Imagine a young person with CF not needing airway clearance, not needing inhaled therapies, not needing hospitalizations. I mean, it's really exciting to just think about a potential future like that. Now, I want to make one final important point. Trikafta is clearly a game changer for many, but not all people with CF. We know that some are not eligible based on their mutations. Others have experienced side effects, and still others have not responded as expected. Much more work remains to be done. No one to be left behind.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Great words to remember, and excited to hear about the 2 to 5 and the possibilities of later this year. We're going to keep our fingers crossed. And JP, while we're on modulators, I'm going to ask JP and then maybe Tony one other question about modulators, which last year we talked a lot about the PROMISE study, one of the largest studies we've ever done to learn more about modulators. And can you give us an update about the PROMISE study and any of the things that we're learning so far?
Yeah, happy to. PROMISE, again, is a study looking at people who are prescribed Trikafta as part of their care. And the actual first publication from that came out this year. What we found, I think, is what is most exciting is once you go kind of beyond the boundaries of the clinical trial. You're in a clinical trial, there's you got to meet these certain lung function measures and so on and so forth. Now, when you really prescribe it just the way to essentially all comers, despite having this really wide range of people with mild and more severe disease and so forth, the vast majority of people benefited. There was still dramatic effects seen across sort of all stages of CF disease, a lot more stabilization. There was improvements in lung function, weight, symptoms, cough, even some evidence that the CF bacteria that we worry about and deal with all the time, things like Pseudomonas and other pathogens, a lot less was detected. I mean, the days are early. I wouldn't, draw a conclusion that, all things are completely over and so forth. But, the data is promising. Sorry, couldn't help. I had to say that. But and this study is going to be going on now for up to 5 years. So lots learned, lots more to learn. I'll mention 2 other studies very briefly. Begin, same concept, but in younger kids going down below age 6. We're doing sort of the run-in work right now, preparing for when Trikafta, other modulators get there, and then we can see if we can start having what the impact is if we initiate these drugs early in CF. And then finally, Mayflower is a study that people have heard about or may have heard about. It's enrolling patients with CF who are pregnant and going to follow how mom does and how the baby does. And this is fits right in hand with what's happened with Trikafta. Bruce has mentioned in the past there's been essentially a doubling or tripling of CF pregnancies with Trikafta on board. So we're trying to be, stay in touch and stay aligned with the community. So exciting days.
Yeah, that is a true sign of success. That is fantastic. And Tony, I'm going to ask you one last question. I know that we get asked fairly frequently. We're all grateful for Trikafta, the impact they have, but we'd love to continue to have some other options. So where are we at with, are there other modulators that we might be able to be seeing down the road besides Trikafta?
Well, I think as you just kind of implicated, Mike, that, the key point here is choice. And everybody should understand that some people respond differently to different drugs. Somebody who might respond fabulously to one modulator might not respond as well to another one, and vice versa. So right now, we got a company, AbbVie, and I think people are probably familiar with AbbVie. They're a sponsor here tonight. They're also manufacturers of the PERT Creon that a lot of people end up using. And they have a very robust CFTR modulator program that they're working on right now. They've got at least a couple trials going on internationally as they combine their modulators into one three drug product. And the studies, if you look at clinicaltrials.gov and some of those other websites, might be able to be read out a little bit toward the end of 2022 here, maybe the end of this year somewhat. So good news that we have somebody else in the fight there with us. We're also talking to some other parties that are interested in developing CFTR modulators, and they're kind of like getting their programs together, et cetera. And we might be able to tell you a little bit more about them in the future as they emerge. So more to come on that spectrum. But I think things are looking up as far as getting some choice.
Yeah, the idea of having multiple options to make sure people can benefit the most. I love it. Let's go to Whitney. Whitney, welcome. We love having you. Let's change a little bit. Obviously, we've been talking about research. We've been talking about modulators. But one of the things we know that there's a group that still faces every day is challenges, advanced lung disease, lung transplantation, the things that we say, hey, we need to pay attention to everybody. Can you fill us in sort of in that area? I know it's an area of expertise for you. You want to update us on that area?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. The number of people with CF who need a lung transplant continues to decrease, and this is fantastic news. So last year, all of 2021 in the US, only 47 people with CF received a lung transplant. And that was down from the prior year when 78 received a lung transplant. And then to contextualize it, really over the past decade before that, it was like in the mid 200s each year. So this is a dramatic decrease, one that in the lung transplant community, we're thrilled. We'd love to be put out of business. And so we're thrilled about this decrease in numbers. And we really think it's reflective of the positive impact of Trikafta. But that means that, so we have this group of people with advanced CF lung disease or who previously met the criteria for advanced CF lung disease, who may live for an extended period of time with advanced CF lung disease without needing a lung transplant. But we feel like this group is critical to continue to follow them very closely, because sometime down the line, some of them may go on and need a transplant, and we want to be able to provide the right care at the right time and get them to a transplant center when appropriate. So on an individual level, this means people need to keep consistent visits with their CF care center to monitor down the line. They're doing great on Trikafta, but we need to continue to stay connected and make sure there's no changes. And on the national level, we're using the patient registry data to follow this group that has advanced CF lung disease or ever had the criteria of advanced CF lung disease, to see what happens over time so that we can pick up on trends and inform our decisions. Yes. And then likewise, we know there are people who have already had lung transplants with CF, and we are very dedicated to including them in the community, to hearing their voices, and to continue to support them. And that we have the CF, I just want to mention the CF Foundation Lung Transplant Consortium, which is a series of multiple centers across the country that are networked to facilitate research in the lung transplant space to improve the lives of everyone with CF, supporting the whole person and every person with CF.
Yeah, that was funny. I was going to mention the same thing. I was thinking about, so Dr. Alfaro, who's not on tonight, but could be, talking about the Lung Transplant Consortium, started this work. When we started, we didn't have anything really in lung transplant several years ago. And now we've got this big network really recognized as being one of the real leaders in lung transplantation. So shout out to Al and his team for all the work they're doing to make this possible as well. Whitney, I'm going to ask you another question. One thing we haven't talked much about tonight, COVID. COVID has affected us all, right? And particularly CF care. And you're still seeing patients. Tell us a little bit about just what you're seeing in the care center network, COVID effects, where we're headed with that.
Absolutely. I think prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of talk, and at CFF, I believe there was a strategic plan to work on a future model of CF care, because we knew the needs of the community were changing. So that was in motion, but really it was the pandemic that accelerated this concept of evolving care. And it kind of, it leapt before us with the rapid uptake of telehealth by necessity. And as a byproduct, there's been a ton of innovation and a lot of shared learning that has been shared across the care center network. And we can really see that change is already underway. Last fall, we assembled a task force called the Evolving CF Model Task Force. And this is a blend of people with CF and their families, multidisciplinary care team members across the country, and CFF staff, who we meet together to brainstorm and try to create opportunities to formally study these new processes that have been launched into place. And we really are interested in studying with rigor new practices that support care that is delivered outside of the traditional CF clinic setting. And in particular, we want to know how this evolving care, how does it impact people with CF and their families? How feasible is it for care teams in the trenches? And we're envisioning that maybe a mixed model of telehealth and in-person clinic visits may be what we're looking towards in the future. And telehealth, although we took it up as a matter of necessity, we have really gleaned that it has some benefits in terms of opening access to specialists when people live in underserved parts of the country. And it's less disruptive to people's lives in terms of missed work and missed school. But overall, we recognize that we need to study all of the changes that are already in place. We need to slow down, study with rigor what's happening to make sure that we're maintaining the same level of excellent care.
And Whitney, I'm impressed the way you just sort of glossed over all the support for care centers during COVID. You're already thinking about the future. I'm impressed. I'm impressed there. But one of the things I think that's been a highlight you mentioned a little bit, and it's been a theme, has just been this idea of making sure that we take care of the whole person, right? And not just, okay, here's your lung function. And Sue, I know this is something in community partnerships you think about all the time, is how we're going to make sure that we help to take care and support the whole person. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and the work you're doing there?
I'd be happy to. So this one really comes down to meeting people where they're at. I think we all have a responsibility when we work at the CF Foundation to evolve our programs, our services, our events, and that's always based on community insights and community listening to really meet these ever-changing needs. So Whitney mentioned a lot of the uncertainties that come with having navigating the complexities of adult life. She also mentioned navigating life with advanced CF lung disease or going through a lung transplant. And that brings me to Next Breath, which is really an evolutionary event. So this is an evolution of CF MiniCon transplant, and this new virtual event will bring together community members where they can connect, share, learn about these two topics together through open, candid conversations. This year's theme is resilient, something this community has always known a thing or two about. And registration, I'm pleased to share, is already open for the event, which is on Thursday, February 24th. So one upside of the pandemic that we've all noted is the ability for more adults to engage in virtual event programming like this one. So there's hundreds of event choices that Mike already mentioned, offered locally, nationally, and these events are focused on connection, activation, education, and much more. I also thought it was so amazing that both Grampians programs and Tomorrow's Leaders programs each doubled in membership. So we're bringing new members into our community every day. So welcome again, especially to all first-time attendees at this event. And lastly, services like the CF Peer Connect and Compass remain really bedrock programs that offer peer-to-peer support or practical support whenever a need arises.
That's great. Yeah, I have to agree with you. It's hard to beat the Grampians. They have the corner on the market for the best name, as well as sometimes the best attitude. So kudos. Well, so Whitney and Sue, thank you. I think this gets back to, again, okay, not only thinking about therapies of tomorrow, but what are we doing today, right? And so, Tony, I'm going to actually keep that theme on the what's things today. And one of the things people continue to face are problems with infections. And we're always getting questions, okay, what's next coming along? But you want to talk a little bit more about some of the programs directly focused on treating infection that are going on right now?
Sure. As you mentioned a little bit earlier, Mike, the Infection Research Initiative reached its initial goal of committing $100 million to help fight CF infection by drug development activities and research. And I think you already mentioned this too, that we're not done. It doesn't mean we're like cutting the checkbook off or something like that. This month alone, we announced 3 awards that were like close to $13 million in commitment. And I'll tell you a little bit about the companies. First, we're supporting one company already in the phage space. And for people that may or may not know, a phage is a fancy word for a virus that attacks and kills bacteria. And they have been used to kill specific bacteria in people. So we're supporting one company that is actually trying to do a clinical trial right now. But we're also talking about 2 or 3 more companies in that area. But we also just started supporting another company called Biomix. And Biomix is developing their phage. There usually need to be cocktails of multiple different kinds of viruses for people to typically inhale to treat Pseudomonas, obviously. And there's also some phage programs underway that we're looking at, but haven't really dipped their toe in the water yet. That might be treating nontuberculous mycobacteria as well. So that's one of the companies, Biomix. Another one is called Enbiotics. Recently changed its name to Spexis. It's out of Switzerland right now. And that company is conducting a study with inhaled colistin, their proprietary version of inhaled colistin as a therapy for chronic infection in people with CF. Now, people with CF in the US might already be taking a non-FDA approved version of inhaled colistin formulated by their pharmacy. But the important part about this trial that they're doing is it's set up that if it's positive and wins, if you will, then that could lead to full FDA approval of the inhaled colistin as a therapy for people with CF. So that's the caveat with that clinical trial. The last one I think that I'll mention of those three is a company called Arivus. And Arivus is again conducting a late phase trial. So these are important trials that is going to study their version of fusidic acid, which is a drug that's improved in certain areas around the world as an ointment and a pill, as a potential therapy, as a potential actually oral therapy. That's the important part to treat CF pulmonary lung exacerbations. So having an effective oral therapy for that would be a big deal, as opposed to maybe allow skipping the IV stuff for a while. So that's those three companies, that kind of stuff. The other thing that we're going to be doing in 2022 and have started doing already is that we're going to keep on evaluating that IRI portfolio, of the companies and what companies doing what and what disease or what infection they're going to attack, and try to focus it and invest in the areas of the most need, both research wise and drug development wise. So finally, I guess, JP and I are kind of like a tag team at the CF Foundation sometimes, or like the Mutt and Jeff. And I'm gonna throw it over to him. I'm the Mutt, he's the Jeff, to like talk a little bit about the phage, because the phage stuff is rapidly going into the clinic.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Yeah, we are two sides of a same coin in a lot of ways, but yeah, a lot of exciting stuff in phage. As Tony mentioned, there's stuff that's coming that we just made investments, but there are at least two phage related programs that we're supporting that are in clinical trials today. One is Armada. It's being conducted through the TDN multi-center, looking at persons who have a long-term or have had chronic infection with Pseudomonas. And another one that we're supporting, that investigators out of Yale, who've really been, done a lot of the pioneering work in this space too, with emergency IND efforts to really find sort of treatments for people who have really difficult to treat chronic infections. So there's other really interesting approaches to treat infections that are in clinical trials. I don't think we have time to go into details, but just to suffice it to say, it's not business as usual. The antibiotic approaches are very different and very exciting and very cutting edge. It's really exciting to be part of that. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mike.
Well, thank you guys. And you're right. Having been in a lot of those meetings, the amount of attention that's paid to the infection space, it's encouraging. A lot of work to do still there, but encouraging. Sue, I'm going to ask you one that we've talked today about how it's important that we reach people with CF who may be underserved or unconnected. And we've talked about a increased attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And talk to us about why that's important. Why do I want to say thanks to everybody in our team who's been working on this, but just talk to us about why that's important.
I would love to. I think it's such an opportunity to really increase our emphasis to really celebrate, recognize, and embrace this diversity within the CF community. We are currently taking great strides to expand the reach of who we hear from, evaluate our programs around what we offer, and it's really critical to reach those who have felt unconnected, or those who have been underserved or underrepresented, as everyone deserves an opportunity to feel a sense of belonging when they engage with us as a CF Foundation. We're also working very hard to address the significant and real health disparities faced by people of color within the CF community. And building an inclusive community is really critical to achieving our mission and fulfilling our promise to serve all people living with cystic fibrosis. We are working to develop actionable steps to help address the factors that really lead to these health inequities and disparities in outcomes. And to really, truly achieve our mission, we are determined to help every person with CF be as healthy as possible. It just makes sense.
Actually, I like that last line. determined to help, what do you say, determined to make sure we help people, every person with CF be as healthy as possible. And we'll take that one home tonight. So let's take a few minutes to answer some questions since people came, and I've looked. I'm going to actually send the first one to you, Whitney, and there's anybody else who wants to. But I think there was somebody who's post lung transplant who was asking about should they be asking their lung transplant physician about getting Trikafta, and what's been the approach, emerging approach in terms of Trikafta and lung transplantation. Can you comment on that for us?
Sure, absolutely. So up to now, it's kind of an individualized decision. So Trikafta helps the CF protein work better all over the body. And obviously with new lungs, it won't work on the new lungs because they don't have CF. But for people who may have a lot of extra pulmonary or outside of the lungs complications, some people are talking with their transplant center about getting it started for symptoms like a lot of sinus disease and sinus infections, and transplant may drain bacteria into the new lungs and cause issues. Likewise, GI complications. So I think it's been sort of a case-by-case decision. There are some drug interactions which make it a little tricky. You have to watch immunosuppressant levels, tacrolimus levels when you get it started, et cetera. And there is a coordinated effort to study this after lung transplant, but right now it hasn't been studied. The results are not an informal study, so it's primarily case by case. And I'd say at our center, maybe we have half the people have talked about it and wanted to try it. The other half have not. So it really just depends on the situation.
So definitely not automatically, but there may be some situations where it makes sense to talk with your doctor.
That's right.
Next one, I'm actually send to Tony and to JP, which saw in there that people said, hey, is there anything going on in the NTM space? We didn't hear anything about abscessus. Usually we're talking a lot about that. Is there anything, are we doing any work in that area?
Well, I'll touch base a little bit on some of the drug development activities. And I'd say we have at least 4, maybe 6 that I can programs off the top of my head in the NTM space. I mean, some of them are related to, organism agnostic therapies, like this inhaled nitric oxide is one of them that people talk about.
I'm going to jump in for 1 second. Thank you. I shouldn't have just said NTM. I should have actually said what it is. I saw a chat that said, what the heck is NTM? So this is nontuberculous mycobacteria, a type of infection that people can get. I'm sorry, Tony, take it away.
Okay, well, I can't do it anymore. No, I think that one of the therapies is the Beyond Air inhaled nitric oxide therapy. Nitric oxide does a lot of things, and one of the things it might do is help be an antimicrobial and get rid of NTM. It's an inhaled therapy that there's a clinical trial going on already. We've got some early drug discovery programs on different kinds of drugs and repurposing potential TB drugs or the same kind of class of drugs of TB that might be involved with the NTM. And we're kind of looking at both the avium and as well as the abscessus, but we're really trying to focus on the abscessus because that really has like virtually nothing going on with it. And some of the therapies that people get like long-term IV amikacin, they end up with having kidney disease and ear problems. So I don't want to talk too long on it, but we have about 4 or 6 different programs that are focused in that area.
Great. Well, thank you for that.
Happy to jump in and just quickly say there's a lot of clinical research that's going on in this space. We've been funding for a number of years the Patients in Predict trial, which is a group of 20 centers that are trying to standardize and also really have good firm outcome understanding of different available therapies for people who have different types of NTM infections. I just was going to highlight too, another one that sort of came to mind to think about was it's not unusual, but repurposing a drug that's IV gallium, known to use to actually treat something very different, high calcium levels. It actually is a great sort of substitute for iron, and that actually is very bad for bacteria, including nontuberculous mycobacteria. So we are supporting a study of that too. So lots of other innovative stuff going on, as Tony had mentioned.
I think the funny thing is we could probably do an entire hour on the nontuberculous mycobacteria, right? So we'll have to maybe consider that for next year. Bruce, I'm going to send one your way. which is I saw a question that was more about, we haven't talked much about GI or liver. And are there things that are going on there? I mean, this is probably can be a group, the group can weigh in on this because there's a lot of different here, but do you want to just talk some about some of the work that's going on both for GI and for liver disease?
Yeah, Mike, we recognize that even with CFTR modulators, some of the GI symptoms persist. And, there have been some pretty careful studies done now where there's a lot of GI symptoms. There are a lot of issues that pulmonologists have probably been ignoring. So we've done a few things. First, we've had invested in recruiting gastroenterologists into the community through a digest program that's been really successful on the clinical front, and some of them moved on to clinical research. And then you mentioned liver. We've been working with a group with Mike Narkowitz and colleagues based out of Denver on a push study, really trying to identify that small fraction of kids primarily that develop liver abnormalities in CF to see, could we predict who might go on to that and then intervene early? So we actually have a fair amount going on in that GI space and recognize it's important. And I think that area will continue to grow.
Yes. Perfect. I'm going to say the other thing I'll mention as well is just the continued development in terms of research of trying to develop a new pancreatic enzyme that we're excited about that could really make a difference down the road. It's a little bit of our pet project, one that had such big impact, and one that we're happy to be partnering with a company on. So yes, GI and liver is still high on the list. I'm going to actually ask, maybe start off with JP, but Tony may want to jump in on this one as well, which somebody asked specifically about 3849, 10 kb C to T and splice mutations. And is there anything going on in that area?
Well, your timing is remarkable.
No, it's a little funny because some of the things we said, okay, we won't talk about that, people are going right in on. So I'm impressed.
Sure. So yes, yes, there's some exciting work going on. This is a rare mutation, causes a problem with sort of knitting the going from the gene to the mRNA. That step gets thrown off, and you just don't make enough functional CFTR, and so that's called a splicing mutation. And these patients are candidates generally for ivacaftor or drugs similar to that, but the benefit is variable. I'll be honest with you. It's a complicated mutation. There is a company that is developing a very specific approach to try to restore that splicing, and that company is called SpliceSense. And we've started to review protocols that they are putting together, and again, moving quickly. So I don't know, Tony, if you've probably spoken with them more recently than I have, but it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we are supporting a company called SpliceSense. It has an American office, but it originally was based in Israel. And as JP mentioned, they're developing unique therapies for rare splice mutations that may or may not be covered by some of the other CFTR modulators. And they're using an approach called an oligonucleotide approach, where there's these little snippets of genetic material that will help start or stop a gene from transcribing and translating and things. And that can help override some of the implications of a splice mutation. So that's kind of their shtick, if you will, with regard to attacking those problems. It'll be an inhaled therapy, much like the other inhaled therapies. Maybe not every day, but maybe once a week or something like that if things work out.
Perfect. So I'm gonna throw one your way, but it's not an easy one, and that is, I think it was it said BreatheCon is fantastic. Do you have any other thoughts about other ways to gather the CF community together, or to be able to have interactions in the CF community to support each other? Are there plans for that, or other programs that weren't mentioned tonight besides those?
I think this is a really innovative time where we are evaluating really how to continue to engage the community and think about that. So this is sort of a thinking and innovative time, and it will always be guided by what the community thinks. We know that our community always has the best ideas. So I would say, if you're a community member listening, throw your idea out there, and let's partner together in it.
Great. Well, thank you, Sue. So, You know what, I might say we're a little past our time, so maybe we'll go ahead and plan on wrapping up. I wanted to say thank you to all of you. There's some questions we didn't fully get to. We'll try to continue to answer those in the future. But before we wrap up, and again, I want to say thanks to each of you on the panel. That was absolutely fantastic. I wanted to give a final word of encouragement as we head into 2022. I don't need to tell you the ways the last 2 years have been particularly challenging, but there is one word that we've been talking about at the foundation, and there's going to be a theme for us this year. And I think I'd like it to be the theme for the entire CF community as we head into 2022. And that word is resilience, right? So resilience. Now, what does resilience mean? If you look it up, the definition, actually there's two parts. There's one that says the capacity to recover quickly from challenges. The other is the ability of an object to spring back into shape. And guess what? Resilience is exactly what the CF community is going to be able to experience in 2022, that ability to recover quickly from challenges and spring back into place. So, I think what we're going to see in 2022 as we start to look forward is that in the next month or two or so, we're going to start to see some of this current Omicron wave settle down some, right? Then we're going to start to enter a phase where we start to move forward with our lives despite COVID, using some of the lessons on safety we've learned to date. And obviously there'll be individual situations you have to be extra careful, but I think we're going to be able to start to move forward. We're going to have an opportunity to once again get together in person as a community in 2022. I know this is going to fan the flames of our passion to defeat CF. It's going to remind us more than ever of our shared mission. And you know what? That passion for our mission is going to drive our continued progress into this next era of CF that you're hearing about, right? The new era of therapeutics and care and adults and transformative therapies. And that is why we should be all encouraged as we look ahead to 2022. So thank you for spending time with us tonight. Happy 2022. Look forward to seeing you in person before too long, and have a great night.